Welcome to our next About Series event. And today we have very special guests, Bożena Baniesz and Donatella Krishma. Bożena and Donatella are partners and co-founders of Claret-Cup, a collaborative studio with emphasis on architecture, object making, and urban research. Together, they contribute to the human-made environment as much by drawing and building, as by photographing, printing, stitching, teaching, cooking, and curating. Welcome.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for the introduction, Anna. So, this presentation today is, let me know if you see the screen.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a selection of work. It's amazing when you put together a presentation, like how exhausting it is thinking of all the things that were done over the years. But generally, what we wanted to talk about, maybe it's a little bit about relationship also with the university and how our practice is founded on collaboration. And in fact, it started at some point. We don't exactly remember what year. Sometimes it's 2011, sometimes it's 2013, because the reality is Boy and I, first and foremost, were very good friends. And we started discussing about what is it architecture, how architects are perceived, and how both of us coming from different parts of the world to LA, how the city was at the same time very interesting and mysterious to us. Being us not really equipped at the beginning of our, when we arrived, to really decode a city that works differently than the cities we were used to in Europe. But going back to our relationship with Woodbury, we both taught classes at Woodbury of many different classes, studios, digital fabrication, study abroad, all of that. But one of the projects that we did at Woodbury that is kind of very dear to our art is the curation of the Wedge Gallery. And in a way, again, it kind of surfaced the fact that we appreciate collaboration. We think we thrive and grow by collaborating with others. And the way we approached the curation of the Wedge Gallery, when we were invited by Ingalil to do it, was to ask ourselves what would have been the one thing that would have attracted students. And we were told that it was food. And so we decided to kind of merge our interest in cooking, and cooking as an act of creating a short-term project of quick realization, but at the same time as a way to create community around food and to share food while discussing about architecture, while discussing about art. So this is how we invited 4 different groups and artists and architects: Studio Cortez, Green Meme, Productora, and April Greiman, to show in the Wedge Gallery. And the first event was again around food, and it was to present the series to the students and to the faculty of Woodbury University. And the way we decided to do this was to kind of create a focal point on the walls where the work of the presentation of the 4 events was described, creating focal point with food. So what we did, we basically literally hung food on the wall. And the title of this series was Have Your Wedge and Eat It Too. So the food was these wedges of cake floating on the walls. And if there is a humbling experience as a designer is trying to make the cakes all look the same, that was the worst part. The more difficult part of the show was to bake those cakes. But after that, it seems like everything was super interesting. There were 3 workshops also related to this series of shows with Cortez, with Productora, and these are a couple of images for the different shows. On the left, Rick Cortez and his beautiful steel elements. April Greiman on the right, basically almost a retrospective on her work. It was really an amazing experience to work with them. And this is There are images from the workshop between Frogtown, which is a renowned architectural firm in Mexico City, on the left, and on the right is Green Meme, both the images of their work and the workshop with the students. Following are a series of projects that basically center on an analysis of the city or the way we perceive the city, but also it is a way to, again, create community with architects and colleagues and artists that are part of this amazing community of Los Angeles creative people. And this was organized by the Pasadena Armory Center for the Art. And we were invited in residence at the Armory. And the idea was to discuss the city with a group of peers, but doing so through food, through personal narrative. And the personal narrative have to do with how everybody perceived the city. So everybody was invited to bring food to participate to a potluck, and also an artifact that described their connection to the city. These artifacts were elaborated by us, and then they were made into small artifacts and messages that were inserted into these piñatas that we designed and fabricated for another event at the Armory, in which basically this piñata were being broken, giving homage to a practice of breaking a piñatas that would be in a Los Angeles party in the backyard, and the element of surprise. But the surprise was basically the narrative of the people who would join our first potluck. And then at the same time, we asked people through this installation on the wall, which was a map with the location of the path of all our participants through the city, to weave their maps and to tell their story. So we collected a series of images and text, and we created this multi-layered projection on top of the map that was created by the participants to our event. Similarly, another project of similar intention was this Frogtown Salon, which happened in Frogtown during the Art Walk, which is basically along the Los Angeles River. And again, at the time, when we conceived of this project, there was a lot of conversation about the neighborhood being gentrified. And so what we decided to do was to have a table game and ask the visitors of the Art Walk to participate with us and to contribute their ideas about the development of the neighborhood. And it was really interesting. We used food, again, candy, to signify different zoning areas. So the blue were public pools, the green were public gardens. And we asked the players to start creating their own map based on what were their wishes for the neighborhood. And it's interesting to see that some of the projects that were proposed that night in this playful way, they actually then became a reality. If today you walk in Frogtown, you'll see that it's full of restaurants and cafes, and the riverfront, which at the time was completely abandoned, is now thriving, not maybe in pandemic, obviously, but like a few months ago, it was thriving with activities and development of different type. Again, that is up for interpretation. Is it good or bad for the neighborhood? But it did happen, and it was interesting to us to see how passionate people are about talking about their neighborhood, and what is the relationship of, what is the perception of architecture or development from the standpoint of people who are not trained in architecture, and how there is a lot in common actually between us and them, if we want to put it this way. And it's also a way for us to kind of interact directly with the public in an environment that is not the strict relationship between client and architect, but it's a relationship that is more spontaneous, and help us gather an insight of what is our role in society, what we should be doing as architects, and what are the things that people cares about, even though there is not a relationship related to a specific project, but trying to create the opportunity to gain those insights. For this event, we screen print some cloths that were basically fraction of the map of Frogtown where the event was held. And the idea was that everybody would go home with a portion of the map, and again, creating this community of people who are something in common, not just in terms of the experience or the idea about the neighborhood, but also a tangible object that reminds them of their neighborhood at that time in history. Probably this map is obsolete by now, but also it made us happy to know that we could give something to people who participated, and each one of them had a fragment of the story, and some of them still do. Along the same line, again, another project in Frogtown at a different time has a similar approach. It was also about the changing of the neighborhood from a place of production to a place where the former warehouses and the former spaces for production got transformed into loft for artists or architects or for people moving into the neighborhood. So again, it was a sensitive subject, this idea of gentrification on one hand, development on the other hand, and what happens to the activities that contribute to the history and the identity of a place. In this case, Frogtown, we learned by going around the neighborhood and just photographing, sometimes following noises, like we heard like noises that are typical of production, banging, I don't know, drilling, all of that, and just kind of nosing around and asking, can we come in? What are you guys doing? And we found out that there was a place where they were making the engine of the Boeing airplanes. And we just asked them if we could take pictures. And because architects, or maybe us, are nerds for things that come in serious, things that make things function, things that are modular in some way. We found out that there was a lot of production going on. This is an abandoned paper mill. There was a pickling factory that was also really fascinating to us, again, for this idea of modularity, for this idea of color and texture and surfaces, slick surfaces, wet surfaces. Again, beautiful, beautiful images just by, you know, dropping on them on any day of the regular production. And so what we did, again, we decided to create a series of postcards since that represented these activities as a way of memorializing that time in history, but also the postcard has something to do with the identity of a place, right? When you buy a postcard and you send it to somebody else, in a way, that postcard captures the identity of that place. And we thought that this place, even though it was completely unknown, that, you know, it's not that these activities were advertised other than to the people who were their customers, that deserved, you know, a place and a higher meaning in the scheme or in the history of the neighborhood. And so we screen printed these postcards from the pictures that we took on site. We made several series, and then during the course of another event, another art walk, we asked people to annotate these postcards and send them to themselves or to the people they liked, and to tell the story of the neighborhood. Another postcard project was the one that we came up for in occasion of the space shuttle last trip, last flight, last mission 26, as it was called. And this is again like a way to celebrate events that occur in the city of Los Angeles in a way that they transform, even if temporarily, how the city works, or like the elements that are relevant in a city, for an event that is a public event, and maybe to also memorialize the history of a city that when it changed just to accommodate for a special event. In this case, the space shuttle basically, after flying all over the city as a kind of celebratory last flight, landed at the airport in Los Angeles, LAX, and then it was paraded through town along this route to find this final home at, I forget the museum, Boya, the Museum of
Science Center.
Science Center.
California Science Center.
So we heard this news at the radio and we thought this is great, you know, and mostly we heard the controversy about the route, like where is this monster machine is going to go through and who, you know, what areas of towns are going to be affected by it. So we looked online and we found the route and we decided to just chase it around town. So we were lucky enough to start at the airport. So we went to the airport, we drove in boys Volvo, and and we started noticing that things were actually going on. There were like light poles being removed. You know, there were cones all over the place, the light poles set aside. There were these signs on this asphalt about where they were going to reinforce the street to be able to support this huge, the weight of this huge thing. We also started noticing that people, again, embrace the identity of certain events, and they start putting little signs or sculptures of the space shuttle. But also we found out that a lot of people were upset because 400 trees got cut along the route of the space shuttle. And then we start noticing like a correspondence between these neighborhoods of town that are considered less desirable and where the space shuttle was going. So where does the city decide to modify to what is okay to cut 400 trees, right? It's probably not in Beverly Hills, probably not in Silver Lake. It was also interesting to see that some, so to speak, monuments of the city or like iconic buildings of the city that were at the time abandoned or in disrepair, they became relevant. Now they are along this route where this exciting thing is happening. So again, we process the pictures, we create some postcards. On the front, the image of the photograph we took along the route, memorializing these changes of the city. On the other side, the map of that specific place. And then we decided to join the event at one point along the route of this, the moving of the space shuttle, which lasted 3 days total. And and of course they had to close the streets and everything. So it became almost a street party. So we joined them with our little mailboxes mounted on the back of our bikes. And we asked people again to memorialize the event and to write the postcards to somebody that they wanted to share this event with. And this is when finally the space shuttle arrives at the location where we were before proceeding towards its final destination. Again, some like iconic moments of Los Angeles, the Krispy Kreme donuts with the Endeavor. And then the postcards, we usually collect them and then we mail them ourselves to the recipients. The series of projects, I don't know if we created a typology, but somehow we ended up being invited by the Red Cats to design the environment for their gala in 2015. And the mandate there was to basically create a space into the theater of the Red Cat Gala, the theater, in the theater itself, for a dinner for donors, fundraising for the institution. And so what we decided to do was to create a ceiling, basically a hanging ceiling above the diners. And the way we conceived of the project was to think of the Red Cat as this institution that is a catalyst for culture. It's an institution that is really progressive, that always brought super interesting shows and super interesting movies and performances. So we placed the Red Cat on the map of Los Angeles as this like center point of culture, and then we start mapping all around it to see what other areas are there, what other epicenters of culture are there, and different type of culture. You know, it could be food, it could be proper art, architecture, theaters, and we started annotating this abstract map, and that became basically a series of origami that they were folded by hand with the help of also some students from Woodbury University, or former students, and a group of volunteers from the theater. They became this folded ceiling that then hung basically with the help of the
rigging system.
Yeah, we basically reused the structure of the theater itself to lift the ceiling up in the ceiling. And then again, in collaboration with the lighting designers of the theater, we studied a way to illuminate this ceiling during the event. With a similar approach, we collaborated with the LA Forum for their 30th anniversary fundraising to create a map of Los Angeles. This time we mapped the activity of the LA Forum throughout the 30 years to become a graphic to be imprinted on the iconic IMSS chairs created by Modernica in the Modernica factory. And it was a very fun event in which the chairs were actually being manufactured during the event at the factory. So that was also interesting. In a way, it kind of tied together our approach to design, mapping, screen printing, of making graphics and fabricating. So we really enjoyed this process, and we learned a lot about how this iconic chair is made, and it's made basically the same way it was made a long time ago when it was first designed. And I guess with this, maybe we can segue in our more, so to speak, like kind of traditional architectural projects with a selection of residential buildings that are at different stages of design or construction currently. And with this, I'm gonna let Boya talk for a while.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think the theme that emerges from Donna's part of the presentation is that we definitely have urban design envy, and we always want to work on kind of projects that address the city in one way or another. And I mean, we continue this with the more traditional work as well in the office. Basically, the bulk of the more architectural work that we're doing right now is actually, so Donna, you're going to do the slides, right?
Yeah, you tell me when you want.
Okay, okay. Is this idea of kind of bending and twisting and stretching the new ADU laws, which are probably still in beta version. They were in beta version for a long time, to contribute to this idea of densification, which in the city, which is attempting to address like a wide range of social and community issues. And we're kind of, the way we are looking at our project is, our custom residential project is also that we are working in this larger framework of the ADUs. So without boring anybody with too much code, talking about the code, almost all the projects that we have in the office, and some of them are larger scale, some of them are smaller scale, have some component of dealing with the ADU ordinance. So in the case of this project in Silver Lake, we are dealing with a lot that's narrow and long, and is actually an R2 lot. But it has what we consider a historically significant mid-century house already on the lot, which would preclude it from being able to be developed as a multi, even like a 2-unit property or a multi-unit property, because of the regulations that apply to such developments, and because of the physical layout of the site and where the existing building is positioned. So the ADU law kind of allowed us to actually develop this site with like a significant size second unit that was allowed by the code, and at the same time to address the existing building and make some additions to the existing building. So again, it's an idea of how the ADU law can be used if creatively thought about for our own purposes, or to serve our own kind of vision for the city, and of course the client's vision too, without just following the code to the letter. So basically this project was mainly driven by the view, and also by the view of the Silver Lake Reservoir, and also the view of the site, which was actually this amazing kind of wild land of plants that was not manicured in any way, but somehow just a nice environment in the middle of the city. And also the interior of the existing house, which was a mid-century 60s post and beam construction, very open, very exposed, very, the texture of the project was very much given by the structure, the structural materials, and just not too much by applied finishes, and the transparency of the house all the way to the landscape. So this project is, so you can see here a model that we made. We titled the ADU, which is at the bottom of the site, a higher garden, because basically the idea was that we sort of peel up the site and cover it again with a garden, because it contributes largely to the view from the existing house above, and also to kind of almost like a miniature idea of bringing the Silver Lake Reservoir onto the site. So to preserve that relationship with its original environment. Here you can see the floor plans in the section. It's a steep site. Again, the access is very challenging, but it allowed us to propose two somewhat equivalent. The ADU law allowed us to propose two equivalent accommodations on the same site. So this is the floor plan of the ADU as it completes the pool at the bottom area and opens up to the views towards the northwest, which are very different from the ADU versus the upper level house. There are some interior views of the proposals, and again, we're always working with this idea of preserving the landscape that's there. For example, the design of the ADU embraces an existing ficus tree and filtering it, inviting it into the space with natural materials and expressing the materials of the structure. And this, yeah, and these are some views of the, so basically this is what you see from the pool level, which is also the roof deck of the ADU. It's more of a forest landscape versus the high view of the observatory and Hollywood sign and Silver Lake Reservoir that you get from the existing house. And of course, you know, in tradition of the Wedge exhibitions and all the other work that we did earlier on in our collaboration with Donatella, you know, we stay being hands-on. So it just seems that custom residential work does require this kind of extra attention from the architect also during construction. And honestly, it's just really fun to do, to be on the site and see something come to fruition that we've been working on for so long in the office. And this project, especially because of the existing house, is also getting developed a little bit differently from a project that would be ground up. And we have a parallel project that's going on at the same time. This project, because of the existing house, is really sort of getting excavated and discovered as we go along, and there are a number of changes that were opportunities that were kind of found along the way of working with the house closely. You know, we go there more than once a week, sometimes 2-3 times a week, and if there are opportunities, we have, you know, a client that also demands and supports the idea of taking opportunities that present themselves during construction. So it's been a very different process from how we worked on other projects that we did build, but a very rewarding one. This was another project with a really interesting story. It actually did it end up being on the tiny houses on HGTV or something like that. So this couple basically found a house that was burned down some 14 years ago, and in a what most people would consider an extremely undesirable site, but something about the texture, the story, the narrative, and just maybe the house just spoke to them, and they fell in love with it, bought it. And again, we used the ADU law to help them develop a portion of the site into basically a tiny home. And the site was challenging in many ways that were not obvious when they bought the site. For example, they didn't understand which lots they bought. They were led to believe that they had lot A, B, and C. And it turned out that they didn't own lot C, which was basically their street access to the property, and that most of the project was not permitted. So basically, the ADU law allowed us to create a semi-legal home for them in the place of the original garage that was mostly destroyed. This is the garage under construction. This is the finish. And you can see the burned down house in the background, which they were actually kind of embracing and converting into an outdoor sort of backyard vegetable garden to give it some new life until it could find, until they could find the funds to develop it further. So this is maybe we can go over this quite quickly. This is another property in Mid-City where we, other than the general LA City codes, we also ran into another layer of the historic, it's in an HPOZ, a historic preservation overlay zone. And we had to preserve a contributing structure, which is what you're looking at, which is a garage, or originally it was a garage in the back of a house. And other than on paper, it was difficult to see a lot of value in the structure. But again, we managed to use the ADU ordinance and some of the restrictions about not letting the city require discretionary approvals to be able to develop, to be able to convert a garage that is in an HPOZ, which made it a little bit easier for us to weave a story that allowed us to shift the garage, then convert it into a backyard ADU, and then add to it, which was allowed without a discretionary approval. So again, what the client wanted had nothing to do with the ADU ordinance. It was just, it charted a path for us that made it possible to permit a project that otherwise wouldn't have been possible to permit. This project is actually in bidding right now, and we're hoping to start construction soon on it. Here are some floor plans. You can see the proposed pool and in a red hatched outline, you see kind of like the conceptual outline of the recreated garage, and which is then converted into an ADU. So, you know, the permit plans had to tell this kind of somewhat convoluted story of conversion, because that's what fit the ADU law at the time, which has been revised since, and things can be more streamlined now. And just some colored views of the model. And this is a project in Montecito Heights, again on a very steep hill, beautiful views, beautiful site, in a wild way. In the back the owner actually has owned the lot for quite some time and has been wanting to develop it with something special. And we got approached by him, and we found that our visions like really aligned on this project, which again allowed for a successful permitting and design process. So the hardest thing on the site was it's extremely steep with an access at the very bottom, was to just emerge out of the ground while respecting all the different code restrictions about not excavating too much, not digging into the hill too much, not having more than 2 6-foot retaining walls, etc. So it was a bit of a Chinese puzzle, but we ended up with and having square footage restrictions as well. And then we wanted to save 2 trees. So between all those restrictions, we came up with a design that managed to satisfy the client's vision as well as the codes. And in this case, the ADU has been designed as a flexible unit. At the time was not allowed in the front of the building. Now it is. So basically, the project is designed with the flexibility for future conversion. And this project is, so this is a series of photos of the model that shows how the project emerges from the ground or is dug into the ground. Construction actually started both at the bottom and at the top, and is kind of coming together in the middle. And this is also, maybe it's worth talking a little bit about the design. So the angles were completely driven by the site views again. And the ribbon wall that you see highlighted in pink is not an indication of color, but it's just an indication of this privacy wall that that shows us which way the site is open, which is more to the northwest. And in the other direction, the project is less open because it has, it's providing privacy from neighbors that are close by. This is just a regular 50-foot wide city lot. So, you know, privacy from close by neighbors is a design driver. The floor plan of the middle level, you can see indoor, outdoor kind of patio, kitchen, living areas, as well as a completely open to the sky roof deck of the lower level, and a pool that may get realized in the future, and the 2 trees that we designed the angle of the upper level around. Here you can also kind of get a sense of the procession from the bottom portion, which is the street entrance, as you kind of like snake up next to the garage, over the garage, into the lower level flexible unit, and then up through the building or on the outside to the upper level. And this is a view of the middle level courtyard with the outdoor patio, and it shows the folding doors closed to the living room and the kitchen in the upper level bedroom areas. And the crazy construction site, which we knew these walls were tall because we had to design how to come out of the ground, but it was quite impressive what they were able to accomplish with machinery on the site. So on the right, you can see the temporary and permanent shoring piles that then become the supporting structure for the garage, the stairs, and the retaining walls. And next shot. This picture was taken recently, maybe yesterday. Yes. Sorry?
Matthew's in there.
Yeah, Matthew's in there. Yeah. To show the current framing status. So we are basically standing on top of the floor of the very top level here. This is the view before the garage stairs were poured as you enter from the street. And actually it was the client's request to use CMU blocks, which they were really interested in breeze blocks initially, but then we found that it was actually going to be form the main structure of the building, and we decided to just use burnished blocks that show a little bit of the aggregate inside, so that we didn't have to apply any additional finishes to the walls for the project. And this is the top view, eerily similar to our foam model as the house is getting kind of carved out of the landscape and built layer by layer.
Thank you so much for the great presentation. Now we can open to the questions.
I have, well, I don't know. Well, yeah, it is a question, I guess. Well, thank you, first of all, very much for your, for the great work and the great presentation. One thing that I thought was interesting is that, you kind of cut the presentation in two parts. One, the first part by Donatella, second part Boyana and Boya, and also in terms of the content, it was very different things. But at the same time, I think there is actually a lot of connection between those two sites. So it's not quite separate worlds. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about if you can elaborate a little bit on the connection between those two different things.
Yeah, maybe I can start and then Donna can add. Yeah, I mean, I feel like as architects, we are kind of, during our training, we're trained to pay attention to like larger things, even if we're not going through like an urban design program necessarily. But, there are so many factors that come into play that are affected by the built environment that I feel like even our early projects were what we're calling paper urbanism, or we didn't really show any of them, but we have this set of wearables with the maps shown on them that we're always trying to connect, the detail, the work that is on the level of paper or fabric or furniture, or even an ADU in the grand scheme of things can be thought of as a small project. But we think about all of them as these sort of levers to make a difference in the larger environment that have the ability to kind of like ripple through. The built environment does belong to everyone that sees it. It's kind of an interesting way how in Los Angeles, or maybe in the United States, people tend to think more in the confines of their property lines. But really, when a building goes up, whether it's a house or even, a shop window, it affects so many people. Donna used to say, the view belongs to everybody who can see it. And so we feel like in that sense, we're always going back to that. We're always thinking about the larger effect of the project and then working on the scale that we can work on, with the funds available, the interest that we can drum up, the audience that we can attract. And maybe Donna probably wants to add. Donna, I can't hear you.
Uh-oh.
So yeah, I don't know. Can I jump in and?
Hold on, Jordan had a question also.
Oh,
Sorry.
I didn't see Jordan. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Hi, my name is Jordan. I am a senior student. Just for preparing myself and my classmates for after graduate, we wonder what programs you guys use in your studio, and so we can be prepared for future.
Should I? Okay, maybe I'll answer.
I don't know if you guys.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
I had to adjust the settings. Yeah, go ahead, Boy. Sorry, because I was distracted with.
Sure. Yeah, I'll keep it simple. Yeah, we actually use a variety of programs. We still also hand sketch, and we use Beam software. We have always used Beam software in this office, either Revit or ArchiCAD. We find that it is more efficient than working in AutoCAD.
But we also use, modeling and sketching.
Yeah, sketches, modeling, yeah.
As possible, and work between one and the other. In fact, we are not very big fans of renderings. It seems like they're very reductive when you can see the space in person. It's just so much more poetic than you can possibly achieve with renderings. And we think too that there is something about the scale of the rendering that is off. So we try to present the clients with a series of different collaterals that could help them to visualize and understand the project at different stages.
Thank you.
So I guess if there is a suggestion that should come from our experiences, just try to learn as much as possible, do as much as possible.
But I think also there is a difference between the tools that we use to present things to the clients and the tools that we use for ourselves. And I think, there are, maybe we would call them like thinking tools, and they might be quite personal and different for everybody, and maybe it's different for different generation. I mean, I find that nothing really replaces the quick sketch in a notebook, and I've been trying with the iPad, and it's, but the hand sketching is just a really useful way of getting ideas out. But we also use the three-dimensional massing, kind of parallel with that. But we don't use any tool exclusively. We kind of jump between the different tools and see what makes sense for each person, for each client, for each stage of the project.
That makes sense. I agree on the idea you saying for the thinking tool is different versus the actually the presentation tool. Because sometimes we do sketches, and also different people would use different tools to express their ideas. But thanks for the information.
Of course.
So I don't know if it's intentional, but you started with the wedge and the wedges of cake, and then your final project had these wedge-shaped forms in it. But clearly your work, first of all, I so enjoyed, it was, sort of nostalgic to see the beautiful, wonderful exhibitions and installations that you did. But I would say that when I look at your work, it really is about the human experience. It's not formal at all. It's really about the client, the place, the context, of course, but also the human experience. And so color and, the layering of textures and, the graphic sensibility that you clearly both have. And I guess my question is, how do you translate some of that into the physical architecture?
Yeah, I think what is relevant, like what has been like the most relevant experience of working is a sense of discovery. And the sense of discovery of the boundaries. And I think to answer to both your questions, yours and also Christophe's earlier, and by presenting this lecture or a similar version of the lecture to other audiences, this theme of the scale and the similarity that runs through the project, it seems is always, at the beginning, was always more evident in the audience than it was in us. So there is a strange cycle of like making, experiencing, and then learning from that. And that it seems like these two minds of our practice are coming together more and more as we experience them and as we put them out and talk about it. We were trying to do everything, I think. Like first, the projects, the paper urbanism projects and the objects, partially they derive from our personal interest in not only the city, but also how to express in terms of like graphics and printing and the objects. Like there is a portion of us, a part of us that wants to make everything. and so how these two minds come together has been a mix of like coming to the realization that they can be more and more close to each other. And I remember also a comment from Matthew as well, and like encouragement of like trying to be more deliberate about that. And so in some occasions, what we've been creating is a version of the map of the furniture scale. We don't have them in this presentation, but we created, for instance, like a big piece of furniture, like sliding doors for a client, with an engraved map of the hill where their house is, and then one handle is their house on the lot, for instance. Or for somebody else, we created a graphic that tells the story of finding this lot that was burned down. So it's a mix between our interest and our coming to the realization that these two brains can collaborate more together, and also the opportunity. So the opportunity that could be given by a client who knows that we also do these other things and they're interested in it. And us in trying to carve the time from a project to also think about this type of narrative and how do we introduce it. Because, I mean, I know that everybody who's in this panel who works, practice, and has practiced or observed other one practicing is not always easy, or it's not always immediate to find that opportunity to kind of like drive the design process from the perspective of a narrative that then can articulate itself at every scale in the building. So some projects, such as maybe the Red Cat Gala, they're more kind of evidently the marriage of like the architectural arm with the mapping and like narrative components. And some others, you know, we try to find that as we work.
Yeah, in fact, really every time we make a lecture, this is like not even half of what we did in the past, and it's just amazing to remember. It's a lot. I mean, all of it is a lot of work, and you end up doing a lot of working, and then the thinking sometimes comes later, and the learning, and then the implementing next time around. So I think another thing that might be interesting to say about your comment, Inga-Lill, about the human experience is that also the reality is that for us, the experience of a project is more during the design phase and the construction phase, because once it's done, now it's not really our experience anymore. So so for us, it's important, that experience of building it and designing it, because really that's our work. In the end, what other people see is the building or the object or the wearables. And I think this is why we like the wearables so much, because their life just starts with us, and then they also have the second life with other people. But in architecture, you know, when a project is it's in the office for like 2-3 years, in construction, in design, it's just really important that you know, that is our relationship to the project, to the clients, to the work. And we constantly are working on making that a learning experience and one that we want to repeat over and over.
Thank you.
Makes me miss banquets and potlucks so much.
Oh, we miss that too. We miss that too. Yeah. And it's not over. We just,
Just pause.
yeah, it's just a pause.
So Donatella, I just have one more question, actually. I came in late because I had a meeting, but I just saw the last half, but it's really beautiful work. And I've known both of you for such a long time, and it's so amazing to see you doing this, such beautiful projects. So I'm like super happy for you. And I'm wondering, I remember I was back years ago, I was at the potluck you did when you had the, and I'm just wondering, like, I'm seeing your sort of work, your work like increase in scales, and I'm like, how would you feel? Do you think about going to that urban planning scale and like thinking about some of the things you were looking on paper and how that actually works in a massive scale? Or is that scale like too big for you, do you think?
No, actually, I mean, I think we think about the urban scale all the time. We discuss it. We, again, using Los Angeles as kind of a test bed for ideas. We didn't have the opportunity to work at that scale. Me particularly, since I moved to LA, I worked in an office that worked at the urban scale before, but since that was in the infancy of my practice, my experience, I would absolutely love to have the opportunity to work at that scale. Again, both on the built environment, but also has, the built environment relates to the community. It seems like right now there are so many opportunities everywhere. Like I live by the Echo Park Lake, and it is amazing how a community of dwellers developed in the last, I want to say maybe since 2019, I started noticing the first tents. And now they have a community garden. There is like almost a salon.
Kitchen, yeah.
The city is bursting with opportunity for architects to deploy ideas and creatives of every type and citizens. And we would love to have the opportunity to work at that scale. It just hasn't presented itself. For as many projects that we output, we have like another 10 that we talk about, and they just are a way for Boy and I to kind of grow our approach to things, or like exchange ideas, and hopefully, I don't know, one day maybe they're going to come out of the drawer. I don't know, but yeah, we are interested. We think about it all the time.
That'll be great. And
thank you for joining us. It was so you, Laura.
I know, it's been a while. No, it's beautiful work. It's amazing. I saw your Instagram the other day with Matt. You were on the that last project. I was like, oh my God, what is happening there? So much excavation. Yeah, it's brilliant.
And one thing, actually, maybe this is a good segue. One little piece of advice that we have towards the students that actually came up from a friend this morning. This idea of like a community, like today we have so much history with all of you, and one thing that is obvious is like how you start creating this type of network, this type of relationship and bond when you are in school, and your peers today are going to be your peers tomorrow in the profession, and there is so much to learn from one another. That I don't know, like if we could leave you with a little piece of advice, is not only be curious and try different things, but also bond with your peers and be curious about their work and ask them to validate your work, to critique your work, to give you a piece of advice. And it's super important in a profession that is, it really builds itself over a very long time, and you're going to need each other.
Thank you so much for your advice and for the amazing presentation. I don't know if we have any other questions.
Yeah, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say are the top skills that you look for in your firm if you are to hire?
Yeah, so one thing that we really value is the ability of, so it's like a sense of responsibility. Like we're a small office, so basically everybody needs to be able to do everything. And if you don't, then you basically create more work for Boy and I. So And because our practice is highly collaborative, like we really value other people's input. With us, you're never going to be relegated to like draft. Like we welcome ideas, we welcome the ability of self-directing the process and to contribute, like as an adult, as someone who, you know, is intimidating, but it is necessary. Like you have to make those mistakes. You have to say, in quote, the stupid thing, which doesn't really exist. But I think what we value most and foremost is initiative and passion, you know, wanting to contribute. Then the other skills, you can learn them, you know, like 1 week Revit course, you're done. You can, you know, participate. But to be driven with intention, with care, with compassion, with passion, that's is something that we look for. A little bit of Revit.
Thank you so much. I think this would conclude our event today. Thank you so much for your presentation, and thank you everybody for attending our event.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So great to see you again.
Nice to see everyone.
So good to see you. Thank you.